We are Portlife Church. Our vision is to bring life to the Port community and beyond. We do this by knowing, loving and serving our God, our church, our college, our community and our world.
Thanks, guys. What a great time of worship. Welcome to Portlife Church. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sally, and it is great to have you here with us this morning. If it is your first time, we would love you to stay around after the service. That gives us a chance to get to meet you, and you a chance to meet us. So we have a free drink on us. You can have a tea, coffee, Coke, milkshake, whatever you like, and it's a great chance for us to catch up. Last weekend, we had our women's retreat. And Sarah has put together a beautiful video, which I'd like you to see, which is a little bit of a recap of what happened.
Renew, our weekend getaway for Portlife women. Besides the beautiful setting, the gorgeous way the team arranged the hall, a wonderful masseuse on hand, and lots of pampering goodies as gifts, what I enjoyed most about Renew was not having a mental or physical to-do list. I could simply be chilled, comfortable, cared for and loved.
It was awesome being at Renew this year. It was a wonderful opportunity to connect with lots of different women and to hear their stories, and I was super encouraged by how they resonated with my life and my story as well.
Renew was absolutely wonderful, and I absolutely loved how balanced it was with enough worship time and also enough time to actually get to know a lot of the other ladies. I also loved just all the honest testimonies. I feel like there was something in there for everyone, and it really touched my heart.
I left Renew so inspired by others' obedience and faithfulness to God. It gave me great encouragement in my own response to His word and His love.
It was such a good weekend. For the women that went, wouldn't you agree? It was so good. I want to say thank you again to my team. I had an amazing team who just, anytime something needed to be done, they're like, yes, let me do that. They were so enthusiastic, and it would not have been possible without you. Thank you so much again for those of you who did that. We're already talking about the next one. We want to do it again next year. So we're looking at dates, we're looking at options, and as soon as I've got a date, I'm going to let you know, because I want to give you lots of time, to save the date so that nobody misses out next year. I'd love to see you all there. I want to talk a little bit about our black tie dinner next. The purpose of our black tie dinner is to raise money for the Myanmar project, which is a project our church has been involved in for nearly a decade. And this, if you know much about the country of Myanmar, it is an extremely poor country, and it is not in a good position at the moment at all. Their healthcare system is the second worst in the world after Sierra Leone. So you can imagine with something like COVID, how bad it is over there at the moment. They've also, in February, there's a military coup of the democratically elected government. They've all been arrested. And so that is, at least for the next year, under a military coup. So it is in a really bad situation. But we've been working in this country, like I said, for nearly a decade. We have purchased land, we built a children's home, and we have 12 children living in this home, being educated, loved, raised up, feeling part of a family where they belong, and taught about Jesus, of course, which is really exciting. We've also built, and we're in the process of building, a second building on that same property, and we are almost finished with this, and that building is now going to be used for the foreseeable future for the church in Myanmar, and that's the church that we've partnered with this children's home. We've provided all the funds, and they've provided the people and the support to make that happen. So they're going to be, we're going to be hosting them in the second building, and also the Bible college, where they are raising up pastors to go out across Myanmar and plant churches and preach the gospel. So we are really excited that we're going to enable them with this second building to reach even more than this family that we've been working with, these children. We're now going to be able to make an impact across all of Myanmar. So we're very excited by this. And all of this has been possible. We've raised over $600,000 over the last decade for this project, which is incredible. All of this has been possible because of people who regularly give week after week to the Myanmar project, and thank you so much to those of you who do that week after week. But also, once every 2 years, we hold a black tie dinner. And this is our big injection of funds where we try and raise a ton of money, 25, 30,000, 35, whatever we can do. And that helps us with those bigger projects like the buildings. And so we need that. We were meant to do it last year because of COVID, it had to get cancelled. And so this year, it's even more important that we raise that big chunk of money to help finish off this building project, outfit it, and help continue the project in the coming years. So, there's a couple of things you can do to help with this. First of all, come along to the black tie dinner. That's the first one. It is a great night. Everyone gets dressed up all fancy. There's a 3-course dinner at the Lakes Resort. It is a lot of fun. We have a great time at those dinners. The tickets are $99 each. Now that may seem expensive, but the reason is because a big chunk of that money actually goes straight to the Myanmar project. So a portion of it's used to pay for the meal and the rest of it is used for the Myanmar project. So just by buying a ticket, you are helping with the project. But there's more you can do because we are also going to have an auction on the night, which is always great fun. We always have a great time at the auction. And we have a great number of good items that have already been donated, but we want more. The more items we have, the more money we can raise. So if you have perhaps if you've got a business and you've got a service or goods you can provide for free, that you can donate to that. Or if you have some collectibles, perhaps like some really good quality sporting memorabilia or some artwork, like a Picasso gathering dust in the shed or something, and you're like, hey, I can donate that to this. Please feel free to donate those items, and that helps us to raise more money. We also have a special deal on at the moment because we don't want you just to come by yourself, although you're welcome to do that, of course. We'd encourage you to grab a group of friends to go. So each table takes 10 people. So we encourage you, go ask your family, your friends, and grab 10 people to come with you to this event. And to help you with that, until the end of June, we have a special deal where you can get a whole table of 10 for $900, so at a discounted rate, to encourage you to take a whole table. So really be thinking and praying about who you can invite to join, and maybe even some new families from the church. You might think, oh, they might not know if they want to come because they don't know many people. Invite them to join you at your table. So we have a Myanmar table right in the portico when you first come in. So if you want to head there after the service, you can book your table of 10. You can find out more information about the dinner. You can sign up to get the newsletter, or you can let them know that you want to donate an item. And we would love you to support us in this way so that we can get this project finished. I think that would be amazing. I now have the pleasure of introducing my husband, the senior pastor, Josh Poyzer. He's going to come and share, and he's going to be continuing our series on Exodus.
Good morning. When I was in my mid-20s, I was up in Darwin, and I remember one day Sally and I and a few friends went out to Edith Falls. Anyone here ever been to Edith Falls? Oh, there's a few. You're going to go there soon, you should. Really good place. But we were there with some friends, and we like to do, when I was younger, I was a bit more of a risk taker than I am now, and we're just exploring through the waterfalls and all that, and some friends came across, we swam across just a body of water. There were some waterfalls nearby, and then there was this sort of a hole, like you saw. Actually, first of all, there were some rocks, so we climbed up on the rocks, and we realised on the other side of the rocks there's this little pool. But then we realised that the pool was quite deep, and so one of my friends decided that he was going to go down, so he went into the pool and realised, kept going down, and he was really good at holding his breath. And then eventually he came up the other side. He was able to go underneath the rocks and come out where the big body of water was. So from a small pool, right underneath all the rocks and out the other side. So of course, we all decided we'd have a go, right? It's my turn. I'm not a strong swimmer. But anyway, the way you had to do it is it's on an angle like this. So I'm crawling down. I went feet first, which is not great, but I went feet first, and I'm sort of holding on to the rocks, pulling myself down deeper, 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 until it's pitch black. At that point, I panicked. I wanted air. You're right. And it's hard to explain because this happens very quickly, but I freaked out. At this point, I am stuck. And I wonder, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're thinking, or you're believing, there's no way out? Maybe you've felt trapped by your circumstances. For example, maybe you hate your job. You really hate your job, but you can't quit because, yes, you could get another job, but you wouldn't earn as much money as you are in this current job, even though you hate it and you need it because you've got a mortgage and you've got this bill and that bill you've got to pay, and so you feel like you've got no other option but to stay trapped in this job that you just hate. Or maybe you feel trapped in a marriage where you feel you're not appreciated, you feel you're not loved, but you feel like, I've got to continue in it anyway. I can't let the kids down. It's not the right thing. I'm meant to stay committed in this relationship, but you feel trapped. Or maybe you're in a really tricky situation and you just can't see in this situation how this situation could possibly get better. How can this possibly get better? Well, in part 2 of our Exodus series today, this is the Israelites. They're in a situation where they believe there is no way out. Now, a little bit of background for those of you that weren't here last week or listening last week. The Israelites have been enslaved by the Egyptians for 430 years. And one day, via a burning bush, God says to Moses this in Exodus 3. He says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So God sends Moses to ask Pharaoh if the Israelites can leave Egypt. And of course, Pharaoh says, no way, you're not taking my slaves. And instead, he just punishes them brutally, makes it even worse for them. Then God goes back to Moses and said, ask him again. Go again. Tell him, all the Israelites, we want to leave. And of course, Pharaoh again says, no, you're not going. Now, God had told Moses, this is what's going to happen. And we're going to skip a bit of the story. And finally, God decides it's time. I'm going to show Pharaoh who's really in charge. And he hits him with 10 plagues. One plague after the other. Egypt is crippled. First of all, blood. He does a plague of blood where basically every waterway, whether it's a river, stream, creek, reservoir, is filled with blood. Then there's a plague of frogs. Frogs everywhere. A plague of gnats, like little fly-type mosquito things that just bite you. A plague of livestock deaths. A plague of boils, which affected animals and people. A plague of hail, destroying all the crops. A plague of locusts that ate the rest of them. a plague of darkness. And after each plague, Moses would go to Pharaoh and say, can we leave? And Pharaoh sometimes would say, oh, all right. And then in the end he'd change his mind and go, nah, you're not leaving. And finally, the last one was a plague, the death of the firstborn son of every Egyptian. And Pharaoh's eldest son dies. And finally, Pharaoh's had enough. And he says, okay, you can go. It says in Exodus 12, Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron during the night. Get out, he ordered. Leave my people and take the rest of the Israelites with you. Go and worship the Lord as you've requested. Take your flocks and herds as you said and be gone. Go, but bless me as you leave. All the Egyptians urged the people of Israel to get out of the land as quickly as possible, for they thought, we'll all die. Please get these people away from us. Now, why so many plagues? Why have 10 plagues? Well, I want to suggest to you this morning it wasn't just to punish Pharaoh. And it wasn't just to get Pharaoh to let the Israelites leave, because if that was the aim, all he had to do was the last plague. If he'd said, if you don't leave, he's going to take your son away, Pharaoh might have looked at it very differently, and especially after that had happened, he might have gone, wow, this is pretty powerful. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I don't know what would be next. Now, God, I believe, had a greater purpose. He wanted Egypt and the Israelites to understand that there is only one God. Egypt, we need to remember, as Nick shared last week, had thousands of gods. They had so many gods, but the Israelites only had one God, didn't they? Well, I also want to suggest to you this morning that's not that simple either. I mean, I want you to imagine that your kids have grown up without Christian parents. Now, if your kids grew up without Christian parents, how would they know who God is? How would they know? You know, in one generation, God can become nothing more than a swear word. That's all it takes. You have one generation that don't follow God, God very quickly becomes nothing more than blasphemy. Now imagine that your family hasn't been free to live in a godly environment for generation after generation after generation after generation after generation for 400 plus years. And you live in one of the most polytheistic societies that has ever existed. And that means that the Egyptians taught that you should worship countless gods. There's so many of them you need to be worshipping. And the pressure put on individuals to conform to that culture would have been enormous. And so the Israelites' view of God, as a result of all that was going on, may very well have been warped. And so God wants to get them back on track. And so God uses the plagues to send a very clear message. And the message is, there is only one true God. See, the Egyptians, they worshipped the River Nile. They thought that was like a god to them. So God's like, okay, I'll show you I'm greater. And turns it to blood. Your very special river, I can do anything to that. They worshipped animals. What did God do? He destroys the animals. They worshipped the sun. What did God do to it? I'll turn it to darkness. Anything you've got that's powerful, I am more powerful. They worshipped Pharaoh. They worshipped the pharaohs. What did he do? He took Pharaoh's heir. Anything you can do, I can do better. I am more powerful. The plagues spoke to both the Israelites and the Egyptians. They said, the God of Moses, this God is greater and more powerful than all our gods. He is the one true God. Now, of course, the final plague, it did pressure Pharaoh to let the Israelites leave. I'm not saying it didn't. That was the final straw. And so Moses and probably 2 million Israelites leave Egypt. Why? Why did God rescue the Israelites? Why did he go to this extent to do this for these people? And I think the answer is really simple. It's because he loved them. In Exodus 3:7, look how God talks about them. He says, the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. He saw them as my people. They were precious to him. He was concerned. He cared about them. He didn't want them suffering anymore because he loved them. He didn't want them to be slaves. He wanted them to be free. He wanted them to be able to be free to go where he wanted them to go. That's a really important point. Not free to do whatever they want, free to go where he wanted them to go. Let's look at Exodus 3:8. He says, "So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians so that they can go and do whatever they want." No. I have rescued them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land. I've got a place for them. I'm rescuing them, but I'm also planning on taking them somewhere. Not free to do what you want, free to go where God's calling you to go. There's a difference. So God wanted them to be free to do his will, so God made a way for them to be free. After God displayed his power with the plagues, he lets them go. Pharaoh lets them go. And it says in Exodus 12:40, the people of Israel had lived in Egypt for 430 years. In fact, it was on the last day of the 430th year that all the Lord's forces left the land. On this night, the Lord kept his promise to bring his people out of the land of Egypt. Now, once they left Egypt, the Israelites, some of them might have thought, oh, this is over. We didn't escape. The Egyptians actually let us go. I mean, they were saying, get out. We don't want you here anymore. So maybe we are free. There's no more slavery, no more brutality, no more issues, no more danger. Soon we'll be in the promised land. We'll be drinking milk and eating honey. Doesn't sound that great, does it? But I think it's a bit more of a picture of just sweet goodness, you know. It's going to be so good. You know, when I picture this is what I'm picturing. I'm picturing this couple that's just started going out, you know, and they're deeply in love. Well, sort of. And after a few days, they're planning their wedding. And like the parents are like, whoa. You need to slow this right down. You are not ready for this. And God's like, whoa, Israelites, you got to slow this down. You are not ready for Canaan. There is no way you're ready for this. They aren't ready for Canaan. They've just left Egypt. How long have they been there? 430 years. They've left Egypt, but Egypt has not left them. I've got to get them out of Egypt, and I've got to get the Egypt out of them, and that is going to take time. Now, believe it or not, I have a Cornish and Irish history. About 200 years ago. Do I look Cornish? Let's face it, I'm not exactly a great example of Cornish people, and I'm not Irish, although I do like short people and leprechauns, so there is something about me, but at the end of the day, I think like an Aussie. I definitely talk like an Aussie. I look like an Aussie, and I probably act like an Aussie, and that's very obvious when I go overseas, especially to Myanmar. It's just very obvious that I'm very Aussie, because you go to different places and you see they are completely different, because the environment that I grew up in is very Aussie. Since my first ancestors would have come over on a boat about 200 years ago from the UK, each generation of Poyzers has slowly got less Cornish and Irish, a mixture of both, and a lot more Aussie. The only thing left Cornish in me is I like Cornish pasties. That is absolutely the last thing. So these Israelites, they live in Egypt for over 400 years. They're completely Egyptian. They are Egyptian. Whether they realise it or not, they've adopted Egyptian practices, they've got Egyptian values, they've got Egyptian beliefs, they've got Egyptian slang, Egyptian philosophies, and Egyptian behaviours. That's what happens when generation after generation after generation after generation live in a certain culture. So God knows, if I send them to the promised land right now, you know what will happen? They'll take Egypt with them. The promised land will just become another little Egypt. That's all that would happen. So God leads them on this journey because he wants to, over time, take a little bit of the Egypt out of them. And it became a journey to freedom. You know, it took a few days to get them out of Egypt, but it took 40 years to get Egypt out of them. So God had them on this journey. And in this journey is this long series of lesson after lesson after lesson. And you'll read this in the book of Exodus particularly. God had so much to teach them. So much to teach them because they are just so Egyptian in the way they're thinking. Where did God start? He's got so much to teach them. You know, why didn't he just go, Leah, let's just take them straight to the promised land? Why not? And I actually think that's a bit like, it would be like giving your kids everything they want and then wondering why they're so terrible with money. God put them in tricky situations for a reason. He led them first of all to the Red Sea because at the Red Sea there was no way out. He wanted them to learn to rely on God. They'd relied on their masters for way too long. He wanted them to rely on God. And so God sets up this detour. I want to show you online. Here's the trip. Here's a 40-year adventure. You know, it starts out in Egypt, number 1. And where they end up in is number 18. Look at the top right-hand corner. And you can see that they could have headed straight up towards the top. It would have been a lot quicker than where they went. A lot quicker. But they're not ready. They're not ready. You'll see why. There's a few reasons to this, and we'll see why. There's a few scriptures that explain why God knew they were not ready to go straight up there, and we're going to see them in a moment. But if you think about it, you've got 40 years. God knows there's going to be 40 years of teaching going on here. And so when you're going to be learning things for 40 years, I reckon what's really important is to look at what's the first 3 things that God taught them. In a 40-year journey, what's the first things if you're trying to take the Egypt out of Israelites? And we can apply that. For you, it might not be Egypt. For you, it might be something to do with your history. It might be that you've grown up in a non-Christian home, or you've grown up in a family that always has anxiety, or you've grown up in families that are always surrounded by depression. No matter what the issue is, what's the first things that God wanted to reveal to these people that they needed to know? What did he want to teach them? I think the first 3 things are really important because he keeps teaching them these 3 things over and over again. But this is what he starts with. The first one, it's pretty simple, follow God. Just because Israel left Egypt did not mean they would follow God. In Proverbs 3:6 it says, seek his will in all you do, and he'll show you which path to take. But he was concerned, God was concerned that when life got tough for the Israelites, they would stop seeking his will, and instead they would want to go back to what they knew. They'd want to go back to their slave masters. You know, it's that whole Stockholm syndrome thing that Nick shared last week. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and listen to his message from last week. It was awesome. So he puts them in a situation where they can't just run back to Egypt. It says in Exodus 13, when Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through Philistine territory. Remember that one they could have gone across the top, even though that was the shortest route to the promised land. God said if the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. At the time, I'm imagining this, the Bible doesn't say this, but I'm imagining there would have been lots of complaints. Why are we going that way? Like, Fred said that, we're going the opposite direction. Canaan's over there and he's sending us over here. And then Peter's like, yeah, why are we doing that? I've heard that as well. And then Mary's like, yeah, well, I've been that direction before. Someone took me for a bit of a walk and I know it's that direction and we're going this way. What are they doing? And I've lost my point to where I am in this message. It's really good. Right, focus. I'll find it in a minute. It's all right. There's got to be a quicker way. But fortunately, Moses does not let them take a vote. It says in Exodus 13:21, the Lord went ahead of them. He guided them during the day with a pillar of cloud, and he provided light at night with a pillar of fire. This allowed them to travel by day or by night. God decided from the very beginning, I'm going to lead the way. I'm going to teach them to follow me. And so he led by cloud by day, fire by night. And so the first thing he actually wanted them to know is, follow me. You know, I believe that you and I, we could all avoid a lot of misery that takes place in our life had we followed that advice. How many times have we had God telling us go that way, but in a little voice in our head went, nah, do that instead? And how does that work out for us? To their credit, the Israelites actually went. They went where Moses said, God said we've got to go, and they followed the cloud by day, the fire by night, and they were blessed because God had what was best for them. Are we following God? Or are we following something else? So the first point, I believe, was follow God. The second one, just as important, really important, trust God. When they left Egypt, they might have been nervous, they might have been worried and scared, but when Moses said, we're leaving, the people trusted Moses and they left. Now, it might seem like an easy thing to do, i.e. leave slavery. Of course, who'd want to be a slave? But they were leaving Egypt that they knew for what? They're leaving Egypt to go to a place they've never been to, a place they knew nothing about, a place they've never seen. It's not that simple. But of course, God has shown his power in the plagues, and the Israelites have been protected, particularly from the last plague. As long as they had the blood on the door, their kid was fine. And so given the recent events, they trusted God a little. So to teach them to really trust God, he had to take them to a very scary place, a place where there was no way out. When I'm in that underwater cave, and as I told you before, I'm panicking. This is all happening really, really quick. I'm about 3 meters down. And I'm not great, as I said, at swimming, but I'm 3 meters down, it's pitch black, my feet are down there, it's on an angle like this. And at that point that I started to panic and I thought, do I try to go that way? Will I make it back up? Is it quicker to keep going that way? In that split second I said, Lord help me. I know it's happening really quick and it's underwater, so I didn't speak like that because then I'd be drowning, right? But in my mind, I'm saying, Lord, help me. And I kid you not, straight away, I really sensed God say to me, just keep going. Don't try to go back, just keep going. So I did. I kept going deeper and deeper. And you know what? It was only about another metre. I went down and all of a sudden, I opened my eyes, even though it was really murky and all this, like, what would you call it, green sort of, yeah, whatever it is going on, mossy stuff, all that business is going on. All of a sudden, I saw light in the water. So I knew that meant up above there had to be an opening. So I just kept going down that extra metre, came up. The relief was unbelievable. And then I put on a big brave face because then my wife saw me and I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. You do it now. Your turn. Yes, Sally had a similar experience doing it, actually. It was hard going. No. But you know what? Israel's underwater cave was the Red Sea. Pharaoh's realised that with all the slave labour gone, something's clicked. And he's gone, I actually now have to pay for labour. I've been getting all this free stuff. All these people have been working for me for free, and now I've got to pay for it. The economy is shot. In fact, we're in big trouble. We need to go and get them. Get those people back. And of course, reports come in that they're lost anyway. I mean, they've gone down towards the Red Sea. They haven't even gone towards Canaan. These guys have got no idea where they're going. They're a basket case. They're useless. This is going to be really, really simple. They didn't realise God was setting them up. But they're thinking, these guys are ripe for the picking. Let's just go and get them. So Pharaoh and his army, they're on the way. They're on chariots. You know, the other guys are on foot. They're on chariots. They're catching up quickly. And when the Israelites see them in the distance, we see how strong their relationship with God is. Where are they at this point in time? In the distance, they can see the enemy is coming. And here's how they respond. Let's see how godly and faith-filled they are. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord and they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us out of here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Just let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness." I think there's still a little bit of Egypt in them. Really did escalate quickly, didn't it? They're not even stuck at that point. I mean, they're just noticing they're in the distance catching up. And this happened time and time again for 40 years. If you read the book, as you read through Exodus, this pattern of behaviour happens over and over again because there is a lot of Egypt that has to be removed from the Israelites. When life is good, you know what they do? They obeyed God, they were great, they were loving Moses, and they're progressing really well. But the instant that a problem came about, the instant that they were challenged, they would complain, they would whinge, they'd turn on the leaders, and then they'd say, "We want to go back to Egypt." You know why they did this? I believe it's because they forgot God's promises. When you forget God's promises, you stop trusting God. When you stop trusting God, you start trusting your fears. And your fears take you to a very bad place. And you end up focusing on the worst possible scenario. And we do the same when we stop reading our Bible. If we're not reading our Bible, then when something bad happens to us, we have also forgotten God's promises. And so we stop trusting God and we start thinking about the worst possible scenarios. In Exodus 14 it says, "But Moses told the people, 'Don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm.'" Moses fully trusted God. He knew that Pharaoh's army is no match for God. I mean, he's seen God's power at work many times. And so he encourages the Israelites to trust God. He's like, "Fear not. Don't run away. Just relax. Are you kidding? Keep calm. There's no way out. We are stuck. They're coming to get us. There's a sea there. What are we meant to do? And you're telling us the solution is don't worry, don't run, just keep calm. Are you out of your flipping mind? Like, what the heck are you thinking?" In Exodus 14:15 it says, "Then the Lord said to Moses," I like this, because then Moses actually thought he had it right, but he needed a little bit of correction from God. And God says, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. Pick up your staff, raise your hand over the sea, divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea to dry ground." God is like, it's great that you're trusting me, Moses, but trusting me does not involve just telling me that you trust me. It also involves you living like you trust me. Everyone is going to have to show that they trust me. You're trapped. There is nowhere to move, right? Right, yep. Well, move. You got nowhere to go, so go. But we can't. There's sea there, they're here. Just go. Prove that you trust me. Moses, lift your hand. When you lift your hand with the staff, the waters are going to rise. You just tell everyone, get moving. And they did. And as he lifted his hand, the sea parted. And the Israelites, all 2 million of them, walked through. I had no idea how long that took. And then as the enemy went through, of course, Moses takes his hand down and God destroyed it with the waters collapsing on Pharaoh's entire army. Number 1, the message of the story is follow God. Number 2, trust God, not yourself. And number 3, the last part of this first part of the story, where God's working out some really important things you need to know. The last one is worship God. In Exodus 14:31 it says, when the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. Now, the Bible doesn't say if they praised God when they were in Egypt. It doesn't say if they praised God when they left Egypt. But after seeing God's power at work when he parted the Red Sea and he defeated Pharaoh and his army, the Israelites knew they were free, and in response they did worship. In Exodus 15, you can see this song that they sang where they were just in awe of God and they just worshipped him. And finally, now they were ready to enter the promised land. Oh no, they weren't. Straight after they worshipped God, in Exodus 15:22, that's only been the first exercise. Exercise number 2, then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea and they moved out into the desert of Shur. They travelled in this desert for 3 days without finding any water. And the Bible says that they complained and they turned on Moses, and this pattern happened over and over and over again. Can't we go back to Egypt? Sure, he just lifted a sea 300 feet off the ground, but we got no water. Let's go back, be slaves again. They're still Egyptian. But with each test, with each challenge, a little bit more of Egypt left them, and a little bit more of God was imparted into them. So what can we take from this story? There's a really powerful thing that happens in this, because I'm sure for those of you that have read the story, this goes on for 40 years. And in the end, Moses dies before he gets to Canaan. He dies. So he never actually gets to experience the promised land. But Moses was a tremendous leader, and he led them for those 40 years as God was chipping away at the lives of everyone else. And who was Moses mentoring? Joshua. Joshua was there in those 40 years. As God's chipping away at them, Joshua's being mentored. He's being taught a non-Egyptian way. And so when Joshua got to the promised land, he didn't go, oh gee, look at all the enemy, this is too scary, let's all run back to Egypt. No, he took it on, and they conquered 2 massive battles, and they conquered both, and then they lived in the land of Canaan. They got the promised land. But it came about because there was a process to this. Freedom was a journey. And Joshua, I take heart from this. I think that all of us are on a bit of a journey in life, and I know cliche-wise that's said a lot, but we are on this journey. And what's really interesting out of that, I see Joshua as a bit of a son of Moses in a way. I know it's not his dad, but the way he would have mentored him, I see him a bit like a son-father mentoring relationship. And I think the way that we allow God to chip away at the things in us is going to have an impact on the next generations, if you know what I'm saying there. There's going to be that little bit of Joshua in the next generation if our heart is focused on following, trusting, and worshipping God. 3 really important things. And maybe you've reached the Red Sea. Maybe you feel like the enemy's coming from every direction, not just from one direction. Maybe you feel it's coming from everywhere, and all you've got is this Red Sea here, and you just feel like this is a big metaphor really for I'm stuck. I feel like my life is stuck. I feel like I'm in a situation where I just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm stuck in the cave. I'm feeling trapped. And I really want to encourage you this morning that if you're feeling that way, don't let that be the end of it. Allow God to use the situation to grow you. As long as we continue to follow God, as long as we be led by His word, as long as we trust Him, as long as we do what His word says, and as long as we worship Him, as long as we thank Him for everything that He's done, God can take even the worst situation, the biggest Red Sea that you think you're facing, and He can part waters for you. Don't think it's all over. Don't think there's no way for me out of this. God is bigger than the Red Sea. God is bigger than depression. God is bigger than the issues of your marriage. God is bigger than the issues at your workplace. God is bigger than no matter what the issue you have. And so no matter what you're facing, where you go, I can't deal with this, that's right, you can't, but God can. God can give you a way. If you feel there is no way, great. That means you're ready to rely on God. That's what I want to encourage you to do. It's the only way. We have to follow God, we have to trust God, and we have to worship God and allow Him to do the rest. If we do those 3 things, what a blessed life we will have. In a moment, I'm going to allow the worship team to lead us in a couple of songs. But if anyone this morning would like prayer, just as we're singing those songs, I'm going to invite you I'm going to ask everyone to stand, and we're going to just sing before we end today. Just going to sing a couple of songs. But if today you're feeling like a person where you feel like, you know what, it's not that big, but I do feel trapped. I do feel like there's something that is stopping me from living the life that God's calling me to live. Well, let's deal with it today. I'd love to pray with you. Why have this go on another day, another week? Let's pray. Let's start a process. And you know what? A little bit of it is me praying for you, not much. Most of it, the real power is where you do this. He said to the Israelites, you've got to walk. You've got to cross the sea. I'm not just going to transport you across. You've actually got to do something. And so if you want prayer this morning, I'm also going to probably encourage you to do something. Because that's what I believe God calls us to do. He's the powerful one, but we've got to take steps.